So hi everyone.
Press the buttons.
No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. I'll build it. So hi everyone. My name is Duckaert, based out of Belgium. I flew in this morning very early, but already had some coffee. So if I start to dance, it's because of the coffee. What we asked us to do is to give you a bit of introduction overview in the new world of IT, whereby Kubernetes is a cornerstone in delivering applications to end customers and end users. Now, every time that people ask me something related to technology, I always try to reflect a behavior that is going on in IT with the behavior that I know in my day-to-day life. And one of the things that I'm very interested about is what's going on in a very traditional sector like the car industry, and how are they reinventing themselves. So not only from an engine point of view, whereby they go from traditional fuels into electric cars, but also the way people start to consume a car. And I'm not sure how it is here in the UK, but there are some services out there from BMW and Volvo, whereby you can subscribe to a car service, and during the week when you go to work in the city, you take or you use a very small car, but in the weekend when you go out with family on an activity, you need a bigger car. And they have apps where you can just order the car that you need, and they deliver you the car in front of your door whenever you need it. And you just pay a monthly subscription. So that is how you now start to use cars. And the reason why okay, maybe you can go ahead if you want to pick up next, because it's just, all right. You can build it up. Thank you. So three actions. So the reason I think why people, especially myself, love that type of service is because one, it's subscription-based. I don't have to invest upfront a lot of money. It's just a monthly fee that I pay on my credit card. Second reason is that it offers me choice. If I want a sports car for a day to go out with my mates, I can do it. If I go out with my family, I take a bigger car and so forth. But the third reason, maybe more importantly, is it offers me a very, very simple interaction with the car manufacturer. It's super, super easy. There's zero friction. It's just an app, and I can order the car that I want. Now, if we reflect that towards IT technology, then whenever I meet an IT manager, I ask them, let's try to look at how you handle your technology services towards your customers. And then what we see often is that customers and enterprises are using a lot of proprietary licenses, paying a lot of money upfront to the vendors instead of using a subscription with that partner. In IT, and maybe please feel free to chime in here, in IT we see that there is a massive increase in the costs associated to running applications in order to serve customers with their IT needs. Costs ranging from physical hardware up to labor costs. You need a lot of people now these days to manage and operate traditional applications, which results into friction. It happens frequently that when I go out and talk with developers, that they are frustrated with what they get from the IT team, because they say, hey, if I go to an AWS or to a Google Cloud Platform or to an Azure, I can spin up my entire application in a matter of minutes. But when I go internal into my IT department, I have to wait sometimes for weeks before I get the infrastructure in order to start to develop the application. So if you go to the next slide, please, then I'll zoom in on these three challenges that customers face. One is the proprietary software as well as the proprietary cloud stacks. So you see these three very popular public clouds. One of the challenges that we see is that companies are building dedicated tool sets and dedicated silos to manage these individual cloud resources. Not a lot of companies have a successful multi-cloud strategy implemented just yet. So they have tools to manage Amazon workloads, they have tools to manage Azure workloads, and so forth. but also in the data centers themselves, VMware is still the dominant player in the virtualization space. But in my opinion, with regards to VMware, fantastic company, great technology. But people are still paying a lot of money to the virtualization layer, vSphere, ESXi. A lot of money for that particular functionality. Now, if you go to the public cloud, for example, AWS, the largest infrastructure provider in the world, if I ask you, do you know what the virtualization layer is that AWS uses? Then it does not happen a lot that people know that answer. And that means that the hypervisor virtualization layer is fully commoditized. People don't care anymore. So why the hell would you pay a lot of money to that hypervisor? So if you go to the next slide, it actually explains what I just said. So a lot of costs with regards to your VMware licenses, but also these public clouds. And there's a logo of AWS, but the same is valid for GCP, Google Cloud Platforms, or Azure. It is a fantastic pool of resources that companies can utilize, but not all workloads are a good fit to be deployed in the public cloud. A lot of companies now that I meet, also here in the UK, very large energy providers, they had a public cloud first strategy. Everything had to be deployed in AWS. They are now coming back to us and saying, costs are rising, it's super expensive, and we have a bunch of iron here in our data centers. Come on, help us and give us the same experience that we can get from AWS, but in our own data centers. So they are now moving away from public cloud back on-prem, but they want to have the same experience for their developers, for their computers. I'll talk a little bit more about that. There is a trend, and I hope you have some background with that. If not, please feel free to say. But there is a trend now to transform monolithic applications, massive code-based applications, into microservices. It's to speed up the development, to speed up the time to market, to make troubleshooting sometimes easier, but also to making sure that you can leverage some of the resources underneath to publish the microservices wherever they belong to. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. If you go to the next slide. So these challenges, they can all be very easily tackled with open source. And again, if you go to the next slide, then there are open source variants for VMware, for example. And if you would use those, you immediately save on costs. So that's a very easy statement. You move from proprietary to open source, and boom, you will reduce your licensing costs. Now, what are you waiting for? There is a massive landscape out there. This is just one open source program, the CNCF program. A lot of different open source tools. So go ahead, download it, install it, and you're done. At least that's what you would think. But then again, if you go to the next slide, please, then that's the problem. It's not just go and download the bits, run them, execute them, and utilize them. It's all about how do I operate open source. And the biggest challenge is that it's all about the people. Open source can be super complex. I'll give you one example, OpenStack. Not sure if someone of you ever played with OpenStack, but it's massively complicated. Same with Kubernetes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It is super complex framework. It's built based upon what Google does with their data centers. But none of you is operating a data center like Google. We don't have those experts that Google can hire. So it's always a lack of skills to manage those open source frameworks. And if you can find the people, then they are so high in demand that it's super difficult to retain them. Because another company will be happy to offer them £1,000 more in a month, just saying something here, and they're gone. And again, you will have issues to operate those open source frameworks. So let's take one example, Kubernetes. Just by a raise of hands, anyone with Kubernetes expertise? Okay. Is Kubernetes something that you know, or is it completely new? Okay. So on the left-hand side, you can see different components of the Kubernetes stack. If you are training for the certificate to become a CKE, Certified Kubernetes Administrator, maybe Joe, you need to present it a little bit. But then you will dive into all these individual components. What is a container? What is a pod? How do you expose pods into for your end users? How do you leverage replica sets to making sure that your application is highly available? How do you make sure that you expose the pods into the network via services? How do you package your applications to be able to be orchestrated via Kubernetes? For example, one very well-known package manager is called Helm. But also, how do you deploy your network topologies? How do you deploy persistent storage into Kubernetes with use of Portworx, for example? A lot of different moving pieces. So that's core Kubernetes. If you go to the GitHub repo, you download it, you have it. Easy. But one of the challenges with Kubernetes is that on the right-hand side, you see some things that an enterprise must have in order to fully utilize Kubernetes. And those items are not available out of the box with Kubernetes. So it is my belief that if you deploy Kubernetes, you are suddenly not cloud native. You just have another tool. But you need to have additional puzzle pieces in order to be cloud native. You need to have a self-service catalog for your developers to self-serve themselves. You need to have monitoring solutions in place. You need to have your CI/CD pipelines so that you can continuously improve and continuously deploy your application services. You need to have multi-cloud support. By default, Kubernetes doesn't really matter where you run it. But if you want to be able to deploy your Kubernetes apps across a variety of infrastructure providers, then you better take a lot of coffee to go through the manuals in order to do that. And if you go to the next slide, then this is what Kubernetes looks like. You have a control plane, called the Kubernetes masters. You have a database in there like etcd. You have a lot of different components in there in the masters, and then you have your worker nodes where you will actually schedule your applications, your pods. I have taken here a certain runtime, Docker, but there are multiple runtimes out there. Docker is just the most popular one. Now, in order for you to set up Kubernetes, it's one command on a Mac with Minikube, one command in GKE, one command in AWS, and you have Kubernetes up and running. But if you want to deploy it in production, you want to integrate it into your existing network backbones, firewall services, storage services, and so forth, it can take up to weeks for someone to do that. Monitoring is quite a challenge. As you can see, a lot of moving pieces. So you have to monitor them all. What if something breaks? Go and try to troubleshoot something with a lot of moving pieces. It's not that straightforward. And as Lee already alluded to in his intro, on average, 100 days, there is a new version of Kubernetes. Kubernetes, maybe it's a bit too technical. Kubernetes itself that is not backwards API compatible after a certain upgrade. So that means that if you are today on version A and the community is on version E, so a few versions out, there is no direct upgrade path for you from A to E. So what does that mean is you will always have to make sure that you follow the community. Otherwise, you will be in a world of pain if you want to go from A to E. So within the Kubernetes space, I think you now have like 50, 60 different companies who offer something with Kubernetes. Super hot. In a few weeks, it's a KubeCon, the conference around Kubernetes in San Diego. I believe not quite sure that there are more than 10,000 registrants already for that event. It's massive. And I try to summarize how you can deploy Kubernetes in your enterprise. One is you do it yourself. You go again to the GitHub repo, you download it, and you do it yourself. Another option is you go to AWS, you go to GKE, and you leverage their native Kubernetes service. They all have one. You can, of course, also use multiple public clouds. You use the native Kubernetes service in GCP as well as in AWS, or you buy a Kubernetes distribution like the Ranchers, maybe you know that, like the Red Hat OpenShift, or I should say IBM now these days, and others. But the one thing you should know though, if you go for a Kubernetes distribution, it's, in my opinion again, and I'm maybe a little bit, yeah, I work for Platform9, they pay my bills, so there's a disadvantage in my opinion as well when you have a Kubernetes distribution. And why is that? It's like VMware. You buy software, and if you want to use it, if you want to troubleshoot it, if you have issues with it, you buy professional services, you buy a support subscription, and they will come in and help you to use that Kubernetes distribution. So if you go to the next slide, please, then all these options, they will end up in what I sometimes call the Kubernetes Paradox. Very brief. Kubernetes, the promise of Kubernetes is to do more with less. But with those traditional deployment options, you will still have to hire additional people to manage Kubernetes. There's the paradox. What we believe with Platform9 is you need to be able to consume Kubernetes without having to know how to operate it. Just like, and this is a very, very old example that a lot of presenters have used in the past, but we all consume electricity without having to operate the power plant. We just consume it. And that is the belief with Platform9. We want to offer customers and enterprises the possibility to consume open source technologies in a frictionless, subscription-based manner. So how do we do that? That's our belief. How do we do that? We have introduced a new modern management plane that we host for our customers and that we offer in a software as a service manner to customers. And from within that framework, customers can deploy very powerful open source technologies independent of the underlying infrastructure stack without having to have the expertise to operate those open source frameworks. So for example, if you want to manage bare metal applications, if you want to manage virtual machines in a private cloud, then we leverage the OpenStack framework for that. If you want to manage containerized applications, then we leverage Kubernetes for that. But we also have other managed applications like for monitoring, like for logging, database services, all based on open source that we plug into that framework that is sometimes called a machine-operated framework. And from that framework, we can then allow customers to just consume the application and service with enterprise-grade SLAs. So the two most well-known products of Platform9 are Platform9 Managed Kubernetes and Managed OpenStack. Again, independent of the underlying infrastructure, we see a big uptick in the edge use case. So for example, retailers, coffee stores, they all have their stores. They want to make it smart. If you walk by a store, they want to send you a push message on your phone saying, hey, you bought a pants last week. We now have a shirt that has X amount of discounts that fits with that pants. So those type of services are now being pushed out quite heavily with the edge use case. We also think that you should use the public cloud resources whenever it makes sense. There is an infinite pool of resources that you can utilize, but just use it in an efficient manner, as well as then transform a traditional data center on VMware, on bare metal, on another hypervisor into a real private cloud experience. So, on Kubernetes, we are at Platform9 the leading company to offer a managed Kubernetes service whereby we are responsible for all the day 2 operations, not only installing it, but afterwards also monitor the health state, help you with upgrades. If there is a security challenge, then we will help you with that. If there is an issue, then we will troubleshoot it either together with you, or we can take over the entire troubleshooting process to making sure the Kubernetes stack is always healthy, is always up and running, independent of the underlying infrastructure provided. So this is, you remember maybe the architecture, the traditional architecture on the right. On the left-hand side, you see our Platform9 management plane that is offered as SaaS. That management plane has a communication vehicle into your environment. And again, your environment can be your data center as well as your AWS, GCP, Azure regions, or your edge sites. That communication vehicle communicates over a secure connection towards the management plane. And via that communication channel, we can manage the entire lifecycle of Kubernetes. So you get full access to the application called Kubernetes, but we are responsible for it. We have the service level agreements behind it in order for you to support it. One thing that I want to mention here though, comes up once in a while, is that you see on the right hand side also applications, your bots, your services. We as Platform9, we have zero visibility in that. So we do not offer application performance solutions. We do not breach any type of compliance or security certificate that you might have, like for example AGDPR, because we only look at the Kubernetes layer and we collect metadata from your environment into our management plane over that secure communication channel. I'm a strong believer in open source, very strong believer. So I'm very happy that Platform9 made the decision to use the upstream, the open source variant of Kubernetes. So do we with OpenStack, by the way. So what does that mean is that the open source Kubernetes has a ton of plugins. You saw that on that CNCF landscape. All those plugins, like a Portworx, for example, or any of the other solutions that you can find, will beautifully work with our managed Kubernetes service because all the APIs that they need are there because it is vanilla Kubernetes. So we avoid the lock-in, and we deploy that same code base into public clouds. So we are not going to leverage the native Kubernetes services from the public cloud providers because in our opinion that is some type of lock-in. We want to use the power of the community to offer a multi-cloud Kubernetes fabric. Maybe a little bit zoom in on the day 2 operations and some of the challenges that we see with customers trying to operate Kubernetes by themselves. First of all, they need to set up a new SRE team to making sure they can monitor the environment and know what to do when things break. We have that for you. We have the certified Kubernetes administrators. We have the intelligent software layer to monitor everything and to self-heal. We have a lot of expertise in the security space. And if you go to the next slide, then security is a super hot topic as well within the Kubernetes space. Maybe it's not that clear, but in 2018, there were 4 CVEs reported in Kubernetes. In 2019, from here all the way up, many, many more, much more. And we're not even at the end of the year. The reason why that is so many companies are now starting to consume Kubernetes that the people in this world who with bad intentions, they also know that, and they are now starting to find holes and vulnerabilities in Kubernetes. So you don't only have to keep up with the Kubernetes versions, you also have to make sure that you keep a close eye to the security holes inside Kubernetes. That is what we do for you. So if there is a security, if there is a security issue, then we are responsible for that, and we will help you patch towards a safe version of Kubernetes until the next CB is found. So with our cloud services, bit of marketing, if I may, with our cloud services, we have seen that enterprises can go more quickly to market with their Kubernetes as well as OpenStack-based applications. Because we use OpenStack and we can consolidate a lot of data centers from within one, we can get an overview, of a lot of data centers from one single pane of view. We can immediately see where we can optimize certain resources. Super easy to consume Platform9. You just go to the portal, enter your email address or any of your other Okta or whatever security mechanisms you have in place, and you can start based upon the application catalog, based upon the catalog that your company built, you can start to consume the applications. And like I already said, it's one unified experience for all your different application runtimes, bare metal, virtual machines, and microservices based upon Kubernetes. I believe this is the last slide. Because we only have like 20 minutes, I don't have the time to give you a demo of Platform9, but these are some screenshots of the product. So on the right-hand side below, you can see that I am using X amount of virtual CPUs, that I have reached my quota with regards to memory, and so forth. Now I can request more memory, and the cloud administrator can approve or reject that request. Here you can see an application catalog based upon Helm. So I have a set of applications built inside the Helm package manager, and then I visualize them in an application catalog. If I now click on deploy, then that application with all the right configuration parameters will be deployed on Kubernetes. And on the right-hand side, you can see that there is a general overview of the resource utilization for both OpenStack as well as Kubernetes. Last slide, but I already mentioned it. Maybe on the security piece, here's an example. It's an older one, beginning of this year, I believe. CVE, we patched all our customers in 3 days. It's unseen in the industry. So we're quite proud of our security practices. We have financially backed SLAs, so it is not that we just claim that we will support you. There are financially implications if we don't keep up on those SLAs. Any questions?
Nothing? So we work with one of the retailers with Platform9, and what they've done is gone down the road of doing it themselves. They've brought in a platform, they built it out, but they struggled to actually operate it. And they've actually moved to Platform9 about January of this year to try and make it easier for them to operate and run things. And they're running, their plan was to move 2,000 workloads off of AWS back on prem. They'd only got 200 over because they reached that point they were struggling to operate it and keep it going. Now they've got a plan now with OpenStack and also Kubernetes to be able to move everything back and operate it. They're running about 40 to 50 hosts, I think, to do that in a data center in Southampton. And they're quite a key retailer that you most likely see covered.
Actually, we can name it because they approved it.
Yeah. So it's Kingfisher Group, B&Q, and what's the other one that they Screwfix, isn't it? It's their other brand. So they're running all their services for all their stores and also online now using OpenStack as the platform for it, and it integrates tightly with what they're trying to achieve. One of the key things that we're looking for is the ability to develop in their testing environment using MetalLB, which is a load balancing platform that works well with Kubernetes, but then to just simply deploy it wherever they want with that MetalLB front-end load balancing capabilities, which Platform9 allowed them to do. With some of the other technologies looked at, they couldn't do that. They did actually look at OpenShift, but the figure for purchase was about a factor of 10 more. I think it was something like £600,000 or £700,000 just to actually get off the ground with it, which they thought might not be a good idea to do. So it's made a big difference what they've done using Platform9.
Are the major public cloud providers going to release a service similar to this?
Not to ours, but public cloud providers, they all have a Kubernetes engine.
Yeah.
So you have Azure Kubernetes Service, you have Amazon EKS, so lots and lots of different Kubernetes services inside.
Google's working on a Google on-prem, so you'll get the Google Cloud experience on your own tin. I'm not sure when that's due for release, and that's coming down the pipes. But of course, that again will just be Google.
Yeah.
That's what Platform9 gives you is that agnostic ability to hop wherever.
Of course.
And some of the benefits, we've spoken to a number of organisations, you've got lots of VMware, they've got skills in that space, they've got no skills in Kubernetes. So with Virtual Platform 9, you can run Kubernetes on VMware with no knowledge of Kubernetes, which makes a big jump. Yeah. But I think one of the key things is self-service, that ability to give developers their own environment to spin up workloads and do their testing and development work without interaction with the IT is a big one. And also with the quota system there, you can limit how much capacity they're taking, you can control how long they've got that capacity for as well. Because one of the big problems when people move from physical workloads to virtual machines was sprawl. So you thought you had 200 virtual machines, but you've actually got 300 because people had spun a load of stuff up in the background you didn't know about and never switched them off. But they were consuming resource. If you do that in an AWS environment, it's not just resource you're using, it's a big bill.
Yeah.
And it increases and increases and increases on the back of it. And it can be a bit of a challenge. I've been working with a payment card company, I won't mention the name, but they decided to turn some services on within AWS to do some monitoring using CloudWatch. They turned it all on. They didn't realise that their assumed bill of maybe around about 5,000 a month jumped to 50,000 a month. And as they were growing the service out, they had a forecast of £150,000 a month just for monitoring. So sometimes you can assume you're going to be in this space cost-wise, but actually it could be really up there because it's going to be a lot bigger than you think it is with the sprawl of it. And that's one of the things that technology like Platform might allow you to control.
In fact, maybe add one more thing about the cloud. So sometimes you, just a piece of advice to be careful with some of these providers and read all the small letters. So for example, Microsoft has Azure as a public cloud. They have Azure Kubernetes Service. We're actually talking about there's a global retailer who's going to go all in on Azure Kubernetes Service because Azure, Microsoft is top down, sit down together with the CEO and here's an agreement, blah, 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 blah. And one thing they didn't know, so Microsoft Azure does not provide any support or SLA on their Kubernetes service. So if there's an issue, they're on their own because they're not going to provide service on the Kubernetes fabric. So sometimes you got to be a little bit careful with how they offer Kubernetes.
Nice.
Any other questions before we change over? So what we're going to do is hand over.
Can I respond, sorry? How does this, well, couple really in some ways. Say I want to consume other services in AWS or Azure, like, I don't know, DynamoDB or something like that. Presumably I can just do this, but I'm forcing that kind of part of my system onto AWS, say.
Yeah.
That's probably not a great example, but...
It's a perfect example because AWS RDS, for example, is fully based upon MySQL.
Yeah.
So it's just open source with their own
Kind of,
proprietary
I thought it was a
shell.
bad example, but if...
No, it's a perfect example because Platform9 will also release a managed MySQL offering. So we also have that. But I think I get what you're saying, that if there is a service within one of these public clouds that is good to you and that's from a financial point of view interesting and does not lock you in, like for example with AWS Lambda, if you start to develop against their functions framework, then you are absolutely locked in. You're fully locked in. You will not be able to port the application to another provider at all.
Yeah.
So if you make the right decisions there, then by all means use it. For example, in Google, they are quite known for some of their machine learning services. By all means, you use it. It's there, but just be aware of the catch.
Yeah. I'm more asking if I accept vendor tie-in, and I think, so Kubernetes is hard to set up, but like Lambda's pretty set up. So I could decide, well, I'm just going to throw most of this in Lambdas and accept a bit of vendor tie-in.
Yeah, and a lot of costs. But for example, on Lambda, you have some open source alternatives that run on top of Kubernetes. So you have Knative, for example. You have Vision. You have OpenFaaS. So you have some open source frameworks as well. Yeah.
Are we familiar with what Lambda is?
Loads of those.
So Lambda is a service where you can actually create a function as a service within that database environment, but there are other options to do it. One of the other issues around Lambda is, one is it's quite expensive when you get to scale. And one of the organisation, I think it's people who do the family trees online, Ancestry, they looked at using Lambda, and it would cost them something like 3 times what it would cost them at the moment to do it. So there's no financial benefit going down the route. The other issue is if you're doing long-running functions, a function that takes a little while to go through, Lambda doesn't support it, you can't change the time, you have time out each time. So there's a few issues with Lambda as well in other areas.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.